Welcome back to the third section of your second module, Using Data to Tell a Story. As we work our way through this online grant training and we're thinking about the story that we are creating for our grant makers, it's time to drill specifically into storytelling within foundation grants. When we think about storytelling, what comes to mind? Well, so far we've talked about both data as a way to tell our story, and we've also talked about individual stories or testimonials, quotes, and experiences with our work, our services, our projects, our programs. What is it that we use when it comes to foundation grants? Is there one size fits all answer? Unfortunately, there is not. And before we go any further, the biggest definition related to storytelling that I want you to consider is the application itself. Your application, whether it's a cover letter and a long narrative and a bunch of attachments, or whether it's a number of character counted responses in an online portal, the entire application, it is its own story. So as we think about storytelling in foundations, whether you're talking a small application or something much larger, please keep in mind that basic definition that storytelling in grants at its core is actually about the entirety, the consistency of your entire application of all the elements. So for us to talk about storytelling for foundation grants, I need to talk about the grant life cycle for a moment. These are our 5 basic best practices as it relates to grant seeking. Readiness, industry jargon for competitiveness, thinking about our eligibility, our competitiveness. Research is about how we identify who it is that we might apply to. And when we're doing our research work, we might get some clues about the types of stories that would be appropriate for us to use in our application. That actually makes sense and aligns with those 5 steps we talked about earlier. Looking at the guidelines, looking at the public information and postings and social media that a grant maker might have, and trying to decide what type of story would be appropriate for the grant maker. We do that sort of research work for all grant makers, not only foundation, not only government, but for all. Well, this relationship component of the life cycle is something that we need to think about now as we consider what might our storytelling and ultimately our writing look like when it comes to foundation grants. So if we think about relationships as a life cycle element, what we're saying is that any grant maker, well, it's people, granting to people. And we should, if the grant maker allows, we should reach out via phone, over email, perhaps having a face-to-face board-to-board member conversation or a staff to a board member conversation. But somewhere on the spectrum of relationship building, we should try and have an interaction so that we can get questions answered, so that we can do anything in our power to keep this interaction from only being transactional. So what I propose is that ideally we want to talk to a grant maker voice to voice. So I'm assuming phone is going to be our option. Face-to-face conversations with grant makers are rare, so we'll go with phone as our ideal. Could be we get that great face-to-face, use this idea. Could be that we end up on email, still could use this idea. But if we think about our interactions with our grant makers and that relationship building step in our grant life cycle, what we can do to help determine what should our approach to storytelling for foundation applications be could actually be determined based on these conversations. So what would it sound like if we were to phone to reach out to a current grant maker? Well, of course, this is someone who's funded us already, and so we're going to want to check in. How are they doing? What's new with them? Professionally, as an organization, maybe they have some new strategic planning initiatives coming up. Let's hear what they're up to. We'll probably reciprocate and share a little bit about what's new and exciting with us as an organization. And to do that, we should think about the different stories we talked about in the last section. Client story, donor story, staff story, and community story. So we've got our 4 types of stories. which type of story do we want to use to highlight a recent success for our organization? Then, because we're having a phone conversation, let's listen for the reaction of the grant maker. Did they get really excited? Did they ask a lot of questions based on the story that we shared? Did they interrupt us mid-story? Maybe we weren't being succinct enough in our story. Maybe we weren't getting to the point of the story. Any reaction or interaction or follow-up from the story could give us a clue that we have selected the right type of story, or that maybe the length was the right amount. We gave the right amount of information about the story. It gives us the chance, while giving a great update about success, it gives us a chance to test out the story. We're not going to use the same exact story when it comes time to write the application. They've already at least heard it once, so we're going to pick something different, but it could give us a chance to determine what type of story might a specific grant maker be interested in. Now I can hear what you're thinking. Well, Diane, that works if we have a current grant maker. What if it was a grant maker that is new to us, a grant maker that we want to apply to for the first time to get their funding? Okay, well, the same idea is going to hold true. We will have researched that grant maker and come up with talking points about why we think we're a good fit. Based on their mission and your mission, why do you think there's alignment? That's where we'll have to start our talking points. We probably also need to tell them legitimately, who are we? Where are we from? If they're not a funder in our own community, we probably need to give them a little bit of a geographical context so they could think about where are we on the map. But once we get to that, if the grant maker says, oh, we agree, this could be a fit. This might be something that we're interested in. It's no guarantee, but what it gives us the door to, what we get to start to have a conversation about, are some of those thoughtful questions we might have, things that would help us be more competitive, customize the application to that grant maker. And one such thing that we could share is about how we've got lots of great success stories, thinking about the impact that we're creating, and to share. Would it be okay if I shared one of our recent success stories to see what questions you might have as a result of this story, or to see if it's the type of information that you think might be helpful to your grant making committee or board? So if we could run one of our stories, one of our recent successes by the grant maker to see what their reaction is, we would again be gaining some extra clues about what might we write in the application itself. So to make sure we're on the same page here, what are the types of stories we'd share? It's again one of those 4 types, whether it's client, donor, staff, or community. We should be prepared to share one such story with a grant maker. It might solidify that indeed what we're going to propose is something they're interested in. And it might also have the benefit of giving us some clues. What is their reaction to the story, to the type of story, to the length of the story, to the type of success that's being highlighted? We might get some clues that would help us think about how to customize our writing. Now, this example probably looks familiar from the last section. Based on what we learned through the conversations with the grant maker, we might decide this is the right type of story. In this case, it's a client story. And okay, that's one paragraph, and that's about right in this specific example. But are there other solutions? What else could we do? Well, one of the things that we could do is think about presenting our story in more of a story arc format. That's one solution that we've seen. So a story arc, thinking about more of a, if we were writing fiction, if we were writing other fundraising copy, we'll often talk about the story arc. And that's going to help present rising action and a climax. And we're going to get the reviewer, the grant maker, all excited so that we can then wrap up the details, make sure they understand how we're going to do the work. That's one theory. But I wanted to present you with another example. The idea that when we're talking to our grant makers, we're we've got to remember that it's people granting to people. One of the things that could be done that's slightly different, somewhat non-traditional in a foundation grant compared to the traditional paragraph of a story like we just saw in the last slide, something that we could do is use our story as more of a hook for our grant maker, something that we hope will grab their attention. Then we'll provide a lot of detail and information, and we could wrap it up at the end. Now, why might we try that? The example I'm giving you is from a letter of inquiry or an LOI. So that first gatekeeping process that many foundations use so that an organization that's interested could submit something shorter than a full proposal. The grant maker can read something shorter than the full proposal and then invite a full proposal to be submitted if they think there's a good fit, if they're interested. So this is your one chance to get the invitation to submit a full proposal. Therefore, the idea of doing something that would immediately grab the attention of the grant maker, that would engage them in your story, that would leave them wanting to know more, it probably is an idea that could make sense. It could grab that reviewer. Will it work in all scenarios? Well, it's hard to say, right? Each grant maker individually is different. But in this example, as you can see on the screen, this organization started with a story. They started with a story about a 12-year-old who was homeless. And so, was in danger of failing the 7th grade. So that is the way that they bring you to the story. Wow, you're thinking about Jay's family, the possibility of failing a grade. What is the organization going to do? You've got a cliffhanger in just the first 3 lines of text. So the letter of inquiry then goes through the more traditional information that would be shared. And as you can see, the way that the letter was closed, there was more in between slide 1 and slide 2. But what they closed the letter of inquiry with was the end of the story. What was the impact that was created for this individual and also their family? What happened as a result of this program, of this service? Now the reviewer feels better. They understand the impact that was created. That storyline has been closed. Yes, it was done in a slightly non-traditional way for grant applications. It does feel more like an individual solicitation, an individual appeal letter. But given the nature of a letter of inquiry, especially one where you control the formatting, you're not answering specific online questions. That's not the type of letter of inquiry this was. Rather, this was an open formatting letter style. You've got a lot of control, and using the story in that way to engage the people, the emotions, the senses of what it is that they're experiencing when reading the letter of inquiry is a really creative approach. Again, will it work for all letters of inquiry? No. Will it work for all foundations? No. But hopefully it serves as inspiration so that when you find yourself in a situation for a foundation that is not traditional, small, character-counted responses, or large even, character-counted or word-limited responses, be creative in thinking about your storytelling. What are some of the ways that you can approach the individuals who are reading your application and help connect them to client stories, donor stories, staff stories, or community stories? Try not to get stuck in a box of what does that mean to you. Rather, let the reaction with your grant makers, your relationship building efforts, let that drive what it might look like. Now, to try and provide a little bit of consistency, though, a uniform, universal type suggestion. I get it. It can be stressful when we say, it depends for each grant maker. If overall you step back and look at what it is that you've created for a foundation, what you're trying to do is balance the programmatic details with the storytelling. And so if you are trying something new as an approach for your organization, a quick gut check for you. Did I go too far? Would be the 50% rule. Did I put too much emphasis on the story within the space that I had available? Or did I put too much emphasis on the formal program details and the formal cited statistics? You need to figure out what the balance is. You need to let the individual conversations with each grant maker drive that feeling. And it's because this is a feeling and there's a lot of room for interpretation that one of the best things you can do is make sure you've got fresh eyes, ideally even outside of your organization, that can read your work and provide you with some input, especially if you're trying something that's a little bit new for your organization that you haven't had the chance to get a lot of feedback or reaction to yet. Try to find someone, a friend, a family member, someone else in your professional association. Try to find someone that could be fresh eyes to give you perspective. How does this new idea, this new approach for you, how does it sound? When we think about storytelling in foundation grants, I think it is one of the areas where you get to be the most creative in your approach. What story and how do you present it? But you might have some questions. You might stumble on a specific set of guidelines or a specific foundation that leaves you with questions. How do I handle this? If you have questions like that, by all means, please do reach out. Again, I'm at Diane at dhleonardconsulting.com. Well, we have one more section left in this module about storytelling, and I can't wait to join you there.